The forest was unnervingly quiet. Aaron adjusted the strap of his rifle, scanning the tree line as he moved. The sun was already dipping behind the jagged peaks, and the shadows stretched long across the abandoned trail. His squad had been ambushed 2 days ago, scattered by fire and smoke. He hadn't seen another human since. His rations were dwindling, his comms dead, and he had no idea how deep into alien territory he had wandered. But the silence was broken by a sound that pulled him up short. A cry, faint, trembling, carried on the wind. He froze, heart pounding. It wasn't the howl of a predator or the rumble of an enemy patrol. It was softer, rawer, like a child weeping. Cautiously, he followed it, stepping through the undergrowth until he came upon a clearing filled with rubble. The ruins of some small outpost, half-buried walls, a shattered tower, beams of charred wood leaning against one another. There, kneeling in the dirt, was a girl. Her skin was pale blue, her limbs thin, fragile-looking. Long strands of silvery hair clung to her cheeks, wet with tears. She wore tattered cloth that might once have been a dress, now reduced to rags. When her wide eyes met his, she didn't scream, didn't run. Instead, she stumbled forward, hands clutching at his vest, as if she'd been waiting for him all along. "Follow me," she cried, voice trembling but urgent. Aaron stiffened, instinct screaming caution. It could be a trap. A lone alien girl, right in the path of a lost human soldier? Too convenient. But there was something in her eyes, something that wasn't deceit. Desperation. He had seen that look before, in refugee camps, in the aftermath of battles where civilians searched for missing families. This wasn't an ambush. It was a plea. Before he could answer, she tugged at his sleeve with surprising strength for someone so small. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, you must see." Aaron hesitated, scanning the perimeter. No shadows moved. No ambushers lurked. Just her, trembling, looking up at him with eyes full of tears. Against his better judgment, he gave a curt nod. "Lead the way." The girl, Mira, she said her name was, didn't let go of his hand as she led him off the trail and deeper into the forest. They moved quickly, weaving between thick roots and over streams, the woods darkening as twilight fell. She hardly spoke, except to urge him onward whenever he faltered. Her grip never loosened, as though she feared he would vanish if she let go. Hours passed before the trees began to thin. The ground sloped downward into a valley hidden from the outside world. Aaron stopped short at the sight before him. Makeshift huts dotted the clearing, built from scavenged wood and cloth, clustered around the cracked remains of what must once have been farmland. The air was heavy with smoke from weak cooking fires, but there was no smell of food, only ash and damp earth. And the people, Aaron's breath caught in his throat. They were thin, emaciated, their bones pressing against their skin. Children sat listlessly outside the huts, their eyes hollow, their bellies swollen from hunger. Women stirred empty pots over fires, as if pretending the motions could conjure a meal. Men leaned against walls, too weak to rise. Their gazes turned to him with something between suspicion and hope. This is your home," Aaron murmured, stunned. Mira nodded, her eyes filling again. "We have nothing left. The crops died. The wells dried up. The soldiers took what we had." She tugged at his pack, her small hands trembling. "When I saw you, I thought maybe." It hit him then. She hadn't dragged him here for weapons or protection. She had seen the ration pack slung across his shoulder. To her starving people, even one human soldier carrying food was a beacon of hope. A boy, no older than 10, staggered toward them, his steps unsteady. "Mira, who is he?" the boy asked, his voice weak. Myra's hand tightened around Aaron's. "He's human. He can help us." Aaron's throat tightened. He had only a few days of rations left, barely enough for himself if he wanted to survive long enough to find his squad. But as he looked around at the gaunt faces staring at him, the choice weighed heavier than his rifle ever had. Aaron's instincts told him to pull away, to keep moving, to survive. But every pair of eyes fixed on him hollowed that resolve, stripping it bare. He saw children whose ribs pressed against their skin, mothers too weak to stand, elders who should have been revered but were wasting away in silence. This wasn't a battlefield, it was a graveyard waiting to close. Mira tugged at his sleeve again, her voice a whisper now, pleading. "You have food. Please, even just a little. My people, they haven't eaten in days." Aaron swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the ration pack on his shoulders. He thought of his squad, scattered somewhere out there. He thought of the mission he had sworn to, the orders drilled into him. Survive, regroup, complete the objective. Yet here he was, standing among strangers whose lives would flicker out like candles if he walked away. Slowly, he knelt, slipping the pack off his shoulder. The villagers stirred, a ripple of quiet anticipation running through them. He unzipped it and pulled out a single ration bar. It wasn't much, dense and nutrient-packed, but enough to keep one soldier moving for a day. Mira's eyes widened as if he had just pulled a treasure from the heavens. The boy who had approached earlier licked his lips unconsciously. Aaron broke the bar in half, then again, until 4 small pieces rested in his gloved hand. He handed one to Mira, one to the boy, and 2 to the nearest villagers. They accepted with trembling hands, staring at the food like they were afraid it might vanish. The boy devoured his piece in seconds, crumbs clinging to his lips. Mira ate slower, as if savoring every bite. When she finished, she looked up at Aaron, tears welling once more. "Thank you," she whispered. The words hit him harder than any shell or bullet. Aaron stayed the night in the valley. The villagers offered him a hut, barely more than a frame of wood and cloth, but he chose instead to sit by the dying fire at the village's center. He watched as the people drifted into uneasy sleep, their bodies curling against the cold. Mira sat beside him, her head resting lightly against his arm, too exhausted to stay awake. In the silence, Aaron thought of home, of Earth, of full markets and warm meals, of laughter that wasn't forced through hunger. What would they think, the people back home, if they saw this? If they saw what war had reduced these villagers to? They weren't soldiers, weren't enemies. They were just people trying to live. Dawn came pale and gray. Aaron rose stiffly, his mind still heavy with doubt. He checked his supplies, 3 ration bars left, a half-empty canteen. Enough to survive another few days if he was careful. Not nearly enough for all of them. Mira appeared at his side, eyes still heavy with sleep but determined. "You'll stay, won't you?" she asked softly. Aaron hesitated. "Mira, I can't save everyone. I don't even know if I can save myself. But you saved us last night," she said firmly, gripping his hand. "That's enough." Before he could respond, a shout echoed through the valley. Villagers rushed toward the fields, where a group of men were gathered around one of the wells. Aaron followed quickly, his rifle at the ready, but what he found was worse than an ambush. The well was dry. One of the men lowered a bucket and pulled it up to reveal nothing but dust. A woman sank to her knees, sobbing. The others turned their hollow eyes toward Aaron, as if expecting him to fix what nature had broken. Mira tugged on his sleeve again, desperation burning in her voice. "There's another place. A stream, deep in the mountains. But we're too weak to reach it. You could." Aaron looked at her, then at the villagers, then at his rifle. His orders had been clear: survive, regroup, complete the mission. But here was another mission, one he had never asked for, one written in hunger and hope. He sighed, tightening the strap on his vest. "Show me the way." Mira's face lit up with fragile relief. "I'll take you. I know the path." Together they set off, leaving the valley behind. The climb was steep, the forest thicker the higher they went. Mira walked ahead, barefoot and nimble despite her frailty, guiding him through narrow passes and rocky slopes. Hours passed, the sun climbing high above, until the sound of rushing water reached Aaron's ears. They emerged into a gorge where a stream ran swift and cold, cutting through the rocks like a silver thread. Aaron knelt, filling his canteen and letting the icy water wash over his hands. It was clean, pure, life-giving. Enough to save them, if they could bring it back. Mira knelt beside him, cupping water in her hands and drinking greedily. "You see," she said, wiping her mouth. "We can live again. We just needed help." Aaron stared at the stream, then at Mira's hopeful face. He felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. Bringing this water back meant staying longer, risking exposure, possibly missing his chance to find his squad. But walking away meant leaving Mira and her people to die. For the first time since the ambush, Aaron felt clarity. Orders or not, survival or not, this was what it meant to be human. To choose compassion over calculation. To bring hope where none remained. He rose, adjusting his gear. "Then let's get to work." Aaron searched the gorge until he found a rusted bucket half buried in the rocks, its handle bent but still intact. With a strip of rope from his pack, he fashioned a crude carrier, dipping the bucket into the stream and hauling it up. The weight sloshed against his arm, heavy but manageable. One bucket at a time would not save the village, but it was a start. Mira walked beside him as they began the trek back, her bare feet steady on the stones. She glanced at the bucket as if it were filled with gold. "They won't believe it until they see," she whispered. Aaron grunted, sweat already forming under his armor. The climb down was harder with the extra weight, but he kept going. Every step was driven by the image of hollow-eyed children waiting in the valley. When they returned at dusk, the villagers gathered around. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Aaron set the bucket down in the center. Children surged forward, dipping their hands into the cool water, laughing weakly as they tasted it. Mothers wept openly, cradling their little ones as they drank. The entire valley seemed to breathe again. Aaron stood back, watching. Mira stayed close, her eyes shining in the firelight. "You gave them life," she said softly. "Just water," Aaron muttered, though he couldn't stop a small smile from breaking through. That night, the fire burned brighter. The villagers hummed old songs, their voices frail but warm. For the first time, Aaron felt a strange sense of belonging. He was no longer just a lost soldier. He was part of something larger, something fragile and precious. But peace never lasted long in war. At dawn, while the village still slept, Aaron's sharp ears caught movement at the edge of the valley. He rose silently, rifle in hand, and crept to the ridge. Through the mist, he saw figures, armored patrols moving cautiously among the trees. Not human soldiers, alien troops, the same ones Mira had said took their food. Aaron's stomach clenched. If they found the valley, it would be over. The villagers couldn't fight. They could barely stand. He hurried back, shaking Mira awake. "They're coming," he whispered urgently. Her eyes widened in terror. No, not now. Aaron thought fast. The stream was hope, but also risk. Too much movement might draw attention. He looked around the huts, at the wide, vulnerable clearing. "If they come here, there's no way to defend this place. We have to hide them." Mira's voice trembled. "Where?" "There's nowhere left." Aaron thought back to the gorge. The rocks, the caves along the stream's edge. Concealment, at least for a time. "The water will save them twice," he said firmly. "It feeds them, and it hides them." Within the hour, the villagers were moving in silence, leaning on one another, clutching children as they followed Aaron and Mira back toward the gorge. It was slow, painful work, every step heavy with exhaustion. Aaron carried 2 children on his shoulders, their arms wrapped around his neck like limp vines. By midday, they had reached the gorge. The caves yawned like open mouths, dark but safe. Aaron set to work, camouflaging the entrances with brush and stones while Mira comforted the frightened villagers. When the last child had been hidden inside, Aaron crouched at the edge of the gorge, rifle in hand, eyes locked on the forest beyond. The alien patrol arrived soon after. Their boots crunched against the dry earth as they entered the abandoned valley. Aaron's heart pounded as he watched them search the huts, overturn the meager belongings, muttering in their harsh tongue. They found nothing, but they lingered, suspicious, their gazes sweeping toward the mountains. Aaron's finger tightened on the trigger. One shot would give him away. One sound could doom them all. He forced himself to stay still, every muscle trembling with restraint. Mira crept up beside him, her hand gripping his arm. He could feel her shaking, but her eyes were locked on the patrol with fierce defiance. Minutes dragged into hours before the soldiers finally moved on, disappearing back into the forest. Only when silence returned did Aaron lower his rifle. The villagers emerged slowly from the caves, relief flooding their faces. Children clung to Mira. Elders bowed their heads in gratitude. Aaron exhaled deeply, his body aching from the tension. That night, as they sat by the stream, Mira turned to him. "You saved us again." Aaron shook his head. "I just bought you time. They'll be back. Stronger. More of them." He looked out at the water, glinting silver in the moonlight. "You can't stay here forever. This valley, it's a cage." Mira's expression tightened, sadness clouding her face. "Then where?" "We have nowhere else to go." Aaron thought of his squad, of the extraction point they were supposed to reach. If he could get a signal out, maybe, just maybe, he could bring help. Not for him, but for them. He looked back at Mira, at the way she sat curled against the firelight, her small hands clasped together. Her people had trusted him, a stranger, because hope was all they had left. And somehow, without meaning to, he had become that hope. Aaron placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Then I'll find a way. I promise. Mira met his gaze, and for the first time since he'd found her in the ruins, she smiled. Not weakly, not desperately, but with something fragile and real. The promise weighed heavily on Aaron as the days passed. He had meant the words, but meaning and reality were two different things. Every morning he watched the villagers drink from the stream, their strength returning little by little. Every night he saw the hollow-eyed fear as they whispered about the patrols that would surely return. He knew they couldn't survive long in hiding, not without real help. On the third day, he hiked up the ridge beyond the gorge, climbing until the valley spread wide beneath him. He pulled the battered comm unit from his pack, praying it still had life left in it. The casing was cracked, the signal weak, but he strung an antenna from the highest rocks and powered it on. Static hissed. Aaron Hale, Corporal, reporting. Anyone copy? His voice was low, urgent, carried into the void. For a long time there was nothing. Then, faint and fractured. Copy, Aaron. Alive, coordinate. His heart leapt. He twisted the dial, forcing clarity. Repeat. This is Corporal Aaron Hale, stranded in Sector 9. Coordinates transmitting now. Civilians with me. Repeat. Civilians with me. In need of immediate assistance. The signal flickered, faded, then returned with a single phrase that made his chest tighten. Extraction inbound. Hold position. Aaron lowered the unit, his breath catching. Relief, sharp and dangerous, surged through him. Help was coming. But when he turned and saw Mira climbing the ridge toward him, her face bright with expectation, the relief twisted into something heavier. Did you find them? She asked, eyes wide. Aaron nodded slowly. Yes, my people are coming. A ship. They'll take me out. He hesitated, forcing the next words. And I'll make sure they take you too. All of you. Mira froze, the wind tugging at her hair. Do you mean it? Truly. He crouched to her level, resting a hand on her thin shoulder. I gave you my word. That night, the valley buzzed with a fragile joy. The villagers lit fires higher than they dared before, laughter echoing against the cliffs. For once, they weren't just surviving. They were imagining tomorrow. But tomorrow came with shadows. At dawn, before the sun had fully risen, the patrol returned. Not a handful this time, but a squad, heavily armed, armored, their weapons gleaming in the pale light. They marched straight into the gorge, as if they had known where to find it. Panic erupted. Children cried, elders stumbled. Aaron barked for silence, raising his rifle, his back pressed against the cave wall. Mira clung to him, her eyes blazing with fear. The soldiers spread out, surrounding the clearing. Their leader, a hulking brute with cruel eyes, barked orders in their guttural tongue. Two soldiers advanced, rifles raised, toward the nearest family huddled against the rocks. Aaron's training roared back to life. His mind mapped the terrain, the angles, the odds. They weren't good, but odds didn't matter. Not anymore. He squeezed Mira's hand. Stay behind me. Then he stepped forward, rifle up, and fired. The first alien soldier fell in a spray of sparks. Shouts rang out, weapons turning toward him. Aaron moved on instinct, diving behind cover, returning fire with deadly precision. He wasn't just fighting for himself now. He was fighting for every gaunt face that had looked to him with hope. The villagers scrambled for safety, dragging children into caves. Mira refused to run, her voice piercing the chaos. Aaron, more to the left. She pointed, guiding his aim, her small form steady even as energy bolts scorched the stone around her. Aaron dropped another soldier, then another, but the leader advanced, his armor thick, his weapon humming with power. One shot from it could end this fight, and Aaron knew it. He braced himself, ready for the final exchange, when a sound split the air. A low, rising thunder. The leader looked up, his snarl faltering. Over the ridge, engines roared. A human dropship descended, its guns blazing, shredding the alien formation in a storm of fire. Soldiers leapt from its ramp, weapons sweeping the gorge. The alien patrol scattered, retreating into the forest, leaving their dead behind. Aaron lowered his rifle, chest heaving. Mira stood frozen, staring at the massive ship as it settled into the clearing. Human Marines poured out, securing the area. One of them ran toward Aaron, clapping his shoulder. "Hail! Thought we'd lost you." The Marine shouted over the noise. Command said extraction only, but what the hell is this? He gestured at the villagers, who cowered at the edges of the gorge. Aaron straightened, his voice firm, unshakable. "These people come with us." The Marine frowned. "That's not the order." Aaron met his eyes, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Then make it the order. They come. All of them." Silence hung between them, heavy as stone. Then the Marine sighed, muttered a curse, and waved to the others. "You heard him. Get them aboard." Relief washed over the valley as the villagers were guided toward the ship. Mira held Aaron's hand the entire way, her smile radiant despite the exhaustion in her eyes. As the ramp closed behind them and the dropship lifted into the sky, Mira leaned against him, whispering words only he could hear. "You didn't bring us weapons. You didn't bring us soldiers. You brought us bread. You brought us water. And now, you bring us hope." Aaron closed his eyes, the roar of the engines drowning out the past days of fear. For the first time since the ambush, he felt peace. The truth at Mira's home had left him speechless. But now, leaving the starving valley behind, he understood what it meant. Humanity wasn't defined by orders or battles. It was defined by moments like this. And hope, he realized, was the most human thing of all.